Welcome back to Little Jar's Big Worlds. It's been over a year since the last video, and a lot has happened inside the jar and outside. First off, I never intended on posting these videos when I started recording the ecosphere, until I made the channel. So the earlier videos are going to be shaky and a little random of what I was recording, as I was mainly testing out recording apps. Also, I lost my newest iPhone, and I'm the genius that didn't use the cloud to save the videos. Needless to say, I do now. So there's going to be gaps in the timelines. Quite a few. But in order to give you a proper update, we have to go all the way back to August 26, 2019. The first day I decided to start recording activity in the ecosphere. Water was still cloudy, but you could see some vegetation, a few snails, and a lot of planaria on the glass. Another 2 to 3 days, the water cleared up a little more, and that's when I discovered our little fish friend. But I also started to see tiny organisms like this ball of vorticella. Definitely needed Google to find out what that was. As the water cleared up a little more, I noticed most of the space was being taken up by a thick green layer of what I assumed was algae, like way more than what you see here. So I took some shrimp from my aquarium and put them to work. I also put small fry in the aquarium while the water in the jar settled. I wanted to be sure the vegetation was giving oxygen to the water. The slender pondweed was dominant in the early few months of the ecosphere, and once I saw bubbles coming from the leaves, known as pearling, I knew it was safe for our little buddy to come back into the jar. I find this process quite fascinating, and I spend way too much time just staring at the bubbles. And lastly, I added the only thing not native to the pond, a Marimo mossball. I added it to keep the water conditions stable, and Small Fry quickly got acquainted with his buddies. These were his first moments back in the jar. But that 3 or 4 week period of having Small Fry in the aquarium really allowed for the other creatures in the jar to take off. These little guys that look like the shrimp's little cousin are known as scuds and are amphipods. They were quite abundant, until our fish friend figured out how to catch them all. The bladder snails, my second favorites in the jar, were the first creatures I saw when creating the ecosphere. They're quite the explorers and do a great job of keeping the algae on the glass at bay. Ram's horn snails. They get their name from their obvious resemblance to the horns of a ram. While not one of my favorites, there are a few giants in the jar. I mean, this guy was as big as a quarter. Look at him next to Small Fry. And we also started to see tube effects, or sludge worms, appearing all over the jars. Dance, fellas. Dance. With the water being clear, the dwarf hair grass started taking over the jar, reducing the slender pondweed to a few strands. And the bacopa, the plant under small fry here, was fighting for that light. Time for a trim? Freshly trimmed, I'd add a few clumps of freeze-dried brine shrimp for our little guy. This would happen once every other month, or when it got a little too cramped in the jar. This video was luckily taken on this phone 6 months after the first video was posted on this channel, and it's a little heartbreaking. This would be the last video I have of small fry. On August 23rd of last year, I was home looking into the jar and noticed small fry wasn't swimming around much. The vegetation was a little thick, but not too crazy. He wasn't following my finger like he normally would, so I decided to drop a little brine shrimp in, and he ate it. It was a little slower than his normal savage shark attacks, but he ate it, so I thought everything was okay. I kept an eye on him for the next few days, and he seemed just a little slow, but active. A few more days went by, and then I noticed I couldn't see him through the hair grass, so I decided to give the veg a trim. After carefully searching through the grass without a trace, I assumed he passed a few days earlier, and the snails got to him. I never intended on keeping him after discovering him. I would have put him back, but they started to dredge the pond I got him from, and after several months, the water was still dark brown, and I don't think there was anything alive in the pond, so I kept him. I would have never guessed he would have lived for over 2 years in a jar. He was a great little buddy, and honestly, the reason I started recording these videos in the first place. I'll never forget him. May he rest in peace. After the passing of my little buddy, I didn't think I was going to continue with the videos, but I'm going to keep making them, for small fry. So let's take a look at the jar as it is today. Upon first glance, things look kinda normal. The hair grass is almost completely taken over, leaving 4 stalks of the bacopa and a few strands of the slender pondweed holding on strong. It's great to see all the purling bubbles on the plants. You can spot some snails, but without a fish swimming around in there, the jar looks a little inactive. Let's take a little closer look to see the changes. Still can't see them. Look closelier. The first thing I noticed is the overall population of everything has dropped. Long gone are the days of snail gangs and giants. Now, they're only average in size, and the lack of resources has slowed down their reproduction. But they are still getting busy. See what I'm saying? I haven't seen a bladder snail in months, so I assume they've all died off. And the scuds were long gone thanks to small fry chomping on them. But there was one group that I hadn't seen in over 4 months, and I assumed they had all died off as well. Until... finally, a few Tubifex worms came out. Far from the packed dance clubs from back in the day, but they're still here. You can even see tiny copepods and ostracods swimming around, flourishing without a fish snacking on them. I'm glad to see the jar is thriving, and I will definitely be doing a better job documenting its progress. And I kinda have to now. Started this jar a few months ago, gathering soil, rocks, moss, a few plants, and isopods from the park right next to my house. The jar was doing well for about a month. Plants were settling in, and I hadn't seen one patch of mold anywhere until tragedy struck while I was out of town, and yeah, I came home to a moldy jar of decaying plants. It was super disappointing because the jar was doing so well before I left, but that's a different story for another video, and I promise you won't have to wait a year for it. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like and leave a comment, as it will help the channel out. Let me know if you'd like to continue hearing my voice, if you prefer me to talk like David Attenborough, or if you preferred me to shut my mouth and just keep it to text. And if you don't want to miss the next video, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the little bell so you'll be notified right when it gets uploaded. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.